It's all right. Good afternoon. We know some folks are running late because of some traffic issues in town, but we can go ahead and get started with some of the preliminary stuff. Welcome to the second negotiations meeting between GNEA and the Board of Education team. I'm Jody Marshall. Again, thank everybody for coming. Start by thanking Deb Starling, Board Clerk, for arranging the meeting and taking notes, and Tony Coppola from the Technology Department for helping us with technology. I'm just going to go around the horn and acknowledge who's here, and then we can talk about some folks that are absent as well. Angela Hansen's here from Pioneer Ridge. Mandy Taylor's here from Trail Ridge. Leslie Ron is here from the high school. Waiting on Robbie Smith from Nike. Bev Furlong's here from Sunflower. Denise Russolo is here from Trail Ridge. Tony Taylor here from the high school. Dr. Huff, it looks like he just tried to call me, so my guess is he's running late as well. Amy Drogmeyer is here from the district office. Lana, I'm guessing, is probably tied up in traffic as well. Mark Meyer from the district office is observing. Carrie Owen from Sunflower is observing. And Linda Seek from KNEA is here observing. Okay. And as folks come in, we'll try to take time to introduce them, or else we'll just put them to work. So let me look at the, let me bring up the agenda here, and let's just look at what we have on the agenda. We're going to start with GNEA doing our presentation of the survey they sent out to their membership in fall. Winter. Okay. And then we were going to have Amy do a budget review. And then we were going to see if we could get into some of, I'm guessing, just the non-comp items tonight. So got some good stuff, some good information to cover, and I'm guessing we can work through a few items, or at least discuss a few items. So with all that, I will turn this over to, I believe, Mandy.
All right, I'll go ahead and start. So we gave out a survey to all staff members in the winter. We had a total of 376 responses, 147 from elementary, 102 from middle school, 80 from the high school. We had separated out elementary special education and secondary special education. We got 28 from elementary and 19 from secondary. We asked the secondary and elementary SPED people if they were still giving up their 30-minute duty-free lunch. We are getting much better on that, but we still have 34% of our teachers, which is 16, that are still giving up their lunches to supervise kids. We have 2 teachers that are giving up 4 to 5 times per week, so it's something we need to work on. Most of them are 2 to 3 times, which had 10 teachers. We also asked them if they were giving up their personal plan time to cover the classes. 57% said no, but we still have 20 teachers that are giving up personal plan to cover classes, or they're covering minutes for their kids. And then how often are you giving up? We have 5 teachers that are giving up 4 to 5 times per week, 7 teachers giving up 2 to 3 times per week, and 7 teachers giving up 1 time per week. We also asked how they felt about discretionary days, if 10 was enough. We have 66% of the teachers saying yes. The caveat to that is we asked them if they use their wellness days as well. 94% of our teachers did use their wellness days. 5.9% or 22 teachers did not this year. So some of the high frequency comments we got was more wellness days are needed due to mental fatigue. They really liked the 2 we had last year, and more flex days. They would like a cost of living raise to match inflation. Elementary plan time still coming up. Special education, their high caseloads were a big component of comments we had, and then incentives and stipends to retain the staff that we have. Early childhood special education plan time was brought up, keeping the full or half-day plan days for elementary, and then removing some blackout days, especially during PD days. A lot of people commented on the early release days, getting rid of after-school care, supplemental group changes, extra duty pay increase, class sizes being too large that are impacting instructional effectiveness, equal plan times among electives at middle school level, sellback days, they would like fewer hours or more money, and related services column or move to the highest master's column for the work they required for their degree. Make discretionary and sick days all the same. A 4-day school week, that was fun. Health insurance, we had a lot of concern about the cost and the lack of benefits since we have changed. Parapay was brought up. Bonuses for returning staff, retirement to lower the years to gain health insurance, and interventionists are being pulled to cover classes still. Any questions? Back to you, Jody. Oh.
I'm still thinking, Angela. Okay, which is important for me before I engage.
Okay, sorry. I didn't give you enough wait time.
And I think you might have said this, Mandy, but I was looking at all the numbers on these giving up my lunch. Is it either evident in the data or is it an assumption we can make that these are special ed staff members?
Yes, they're only elementary and secondary special education.
Special ed, okay. That's that category. Okay, that makes sense.
Hey, Jody.
Yes.
I think it'd also be worth noting that when you looked at the numbers there, it was only, which once again, I would say 376 staff members taking it out of 503, I think is a great turnout. But I would say that there's probably more SPED staff than what you see on that because they probably all didn't take the survey. So those numbers are probably, I mean, they're just the numbers of what we actually had that were submitted. And some of those people may not have taken the survey, just to be noted.
Yeah, so it's probably not a representation of the larger group. Okay. I don't know if any of the other board team has questions. We do really appreciate this information, guys. We definitely are grateful that you do this, and we take it seriously. I shared this all last week, and I shared it with several of the admin team members as well, so we could really get in and take some time to look at the comments in particular, and I think we agree with the themes that you highlighted. There were some, you could tell, very unique situations in there, which we don't want to overlook, but we were definitely interested in finding the themes that rose to the top, the common themes, the trends, the patterns. And I probably would take a couple minutes to speak to some of those that you highlighted here. Early release, we'll be reviewing, how's that going, and we're doing that now, and talk about how to improve it for next year. I don't want to speak for Ed Services. And we look forward to some of your proposals on some of these other things, whether it's supplementals or extra duty. Class sizes, we realize that's an important topic for all of our buildings, and I think we're committed to trying to keep those at appropriate levels. Plan time, I know we'll talk about, selling back hours. We'll listen to what you want to propose. Some of these other special ed themes, I think we're prepared to try to address that as best we can. So I feel like we'll have some responses there. The health insurance one, yeah, we hear that. And Amy will talk about that briefly tonight, and we'll get into it much more when we start talking about the comp offer and what it takes to provide adequate health care for all of our employees. That's just a big strain on the budget. Bonus for returning staff. Okay. And then, yeah, just people being pulled to cover. We do appreciate that as well and understand that's happening. So we continue to pour over what you shared because I think there was like 400 plus comments in there, 300 and some. And so I think all of us took a first pass at that. We want to go back through and again, try to look for those larger themes and patterns because that really will influence, guys, what we view as priorities as we try to serve you guys and improve your compensation and work conditions. So we're grateful for that. Anybody else have any observations or thoughts? Okay, thank you. We'll keep using this data to guide us through this process. All right, Amy will do a budget review.
All right. So I'm going to review, and for those of you that watched the special board meeting in February, it'll be very similar. I've just updated with numbers, but then added some additional information in there pertinent to this group. But I will go through this, and please stop me anywhere along the way if you have questions. Happy to answer them. I'm not diving terribly deep in. It's a higher level look, but if there's anything specifically that you want to look at, the books are open, okay? All right, so I'm going to start with this year's budget. So this is what we approve in the fall. This is the amount of money that the district will funnel through this year. We anticipate funneling through with our revenue. And so what I've done here is to kind of break it up. Where does that money come from? So $97.9 million total is what is in our budget, okay? And I will tell you, if you have access to the folder, this file is in there for you already. And I can get copies for anyone else that would like them. Sorry. Thank you for having a copy, Mandy. I was like, darn it, I missed that. So apologies. So again, we wanted to break it out. Where does that money come from? So you can see by those bars, a majority of it is state funding. We also have some local funding and then federally funded programs. Now, this encompasses the entire district, not just operating. So I'll break that down in a minute. So this is every single opportunity or every single fund that comes into the district, whether we know that we get to spend it on whatever we want, or it's very structured of what we can spend it on. So I'll break that down in a moment. So how do we spend that money? These are the categories that we spend it on. So again, that $97.9 million, what we've budgeted for. Our general fund and LOB, we put those together because those are like the least restrictive funds. We can spend them on a litany of things, and we do, mostly instruction, mostly salaries, but there are other things that can go in there as well. And you'll see that's the biggest part of our budget. We also have at-risk funding, and those numbers actually, I've adjusted them for they did go up a little bit this year, and we do anticipate that they will go up even just a little bit more next year. But that's very specific what we can spend that money on for at-risk. We currently spend that on interventionists, our reading and math specialists, any of our aides that are assisting with instructional, a lot of counselors, the social workers that are not part of SPED, all of those things. So we're really intentional about what we put in there to make sure those are the supports above and beyond our classroom teachers to support our kids who are at risk. And there's a load of different ways a student can qualify at risk. So again, I can break any of this down at any point if you'd like to see it. But that is the one fund. It's not necessarily more money. It's just been reallocated, and then it gets a little more tight on what you can spend it on. So the items that are in the red here are the ones that we really don't have much say in where they go. So bond and interest, that is strictly money that comes in and is to pay our bond principal and interest payments. Capital outlay, you guys know that that's only for property, plant, equipment. And then we can spend it on, and we do spend it on some of our salaries for the maintenance and upkeep. So like our maintenance, grounds, custodial staff, some of those salaries go in there. Other things, equipment, software goes in there as well. So that was a kind of a newer thing that was added, and some adjustments we've made this year to give some relief to the general fund. But again, it's not a blank check, unfortunately, because you all know there are lots of projects that we would love to do in the district. Federal programs, those would be our title funds. Flow-through funds, that's really capers mostly. It comes in and goes right back out on the same day. And so we have to count it as revenue and count it as expenses, but we don't really get a say in it. Also in there, special assessment. I just got the bills on my desk, the tax parts that we pay for the improvements that we've made in conjunction with the city. And then cost of living. So that's just a very tiny portion of it. We can levy taxes. We get it in weightings back in base aid, and then we turn around and make the same payment back to the state in June. So they get it to us under the general fund, which is nice, but then we have to turn around and pay it back based on the taxes that we collect under that specific fund. Professional development, we made sure we called that out this year. That was a request to make sure that, especially from the board, that we invest more of our time and resources in that. So that is an area where we have increased our spending. Special education, again, a very large portion of our budget here. You can see it's basically the second largest item. And this is staff, transportation, day treatment, curriculum, resources, all of those supports that go for our special education students. And then restricted funds would be mostly nutrition services. So we bring their money in, but it is strictly theirs, and it's very specific on how it can and can't be spent. All right, so that's the overall picture, $97.9 million. So how much of that do we actually get to spend and decide how we spend it? That's $70.7 million that's budgeted this year. I will share this with you that these are the breakdowns. We spend almost 83% of our operating funds on salaries and benefits and payroll taxes. So you can see that amount in there. We also spend it on the other, what we call operating things, transportation, utilities, facilities like the consumables, custodial supplies, those kinds of things. Our building budgets, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, and our district level budgets, and then business services, which would be insurance and some of the contracts that we have to hold, auditing, some of the software to do, like Skyward and Frontline and those types of things. So that's what we would consider business services. So of that 97 million, 70.7 of it can be what we allocate within some parameters of some of these things, like SPED can only be spent on SPED, at risk on certain things, and you know the drill. So we also want to take a look at staffing, what we have budgeted for this year. We budgeted a 964 head count, which is 814.5 FTE. We know not all of those are filled, but that is what's budgeted. And you can see where those lie. A majority of it is in our instructional certified staff. And then we have paras and aides are the next biggest group, and then the rest of our support that are in there. So again, I'll share this with all of you if you want a breakdown of the actual numbers. Happy to share that beyond what's in here. So then we break that same thing down in payroll. Where do we spend the majority of our payroll? And again, certified, largest number of people, obviously the largest number of spending. And then our classified staff, administrative, then the supplementals and stipends, substitutes, extra duty, those types of things. Thank you. Our payroll itself, out of that $70.7 million, the budgeted payroll is 47.5. The additional payroll costs that are also included in here would be the district paid benefits, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then we obviously have to pay payroll taxes. So employees pay part of it and we pay part of it. So we pay 7.75% and so do you. Okay. So where are we year to date on the budget? So I like to break it into payroll and non-payroll costs. So our projected spend for payroll over the course of the year with all of those things is $58.4 million. We are actually projected to be under budget this year, mostly because of unfilled positions and mostly in classified. You guys know that those are the positions we cannot fill, just haven't been successful. So we're expecting that to be about $1.7 million that we are not projected to spend. We're at 64% of our budget year to date. We know it's kind of backloaded, especially with the lump sum or the way we have to do the accounting and accrue it all in June and then to pay you through August. So at June, there's a huge spike in payroll costs. Our non-payroll is about $12.3 million, and we're running about, not quite 66%. Unfortunately, we are projected to overspend in that, and for these reasons. SPED contractors, so not being able to hire our own certified SPED staff, you guys know that. SLPs, big one. Some of our other, like one-to-one nursing, those types of things that are in there. And then day treatment. We started the year with 6 students, and I believe we now have 14 students in day treatment. And a lot of those are move-ins. We just signed 3 more contracts last night to send kids we cannot meet their needs. They're so severe. And then the other smaller portion of that would be transportation. SPED transportation is up, and then insurance premiums are up as well, and that's expected. So our net projected carryover is about $1.2 million, but those are going to be held in SPED and in at-risk. SPED because we choose to, because we don't get our first state aid payment until October for SPED, so it's to cover the payroll from July through September, basically. We like to have a little reserve in there that we transfer over or use from our funding. And then at-risk is because that number has increased and there are only specific things you can spend it on, it's going to have a little bit in there. Last year we had $900,000 that we left in there to make sure that we could support our interventionists and keep them. It's going to be a little bit higher this year, not significantly. We're not going to leave a lot in SPED, but we're going to leave some just to get through some payroll and keep our cash flow okay. All right. So one of the other things that we do, statutorily required, but it was a great exercise, and we did this with, hopefully some of you were involved. We had building needs assessments. We asked each of our principals to work with building leadership teams, their staff in the buildings, parents, site councils, all of those things, to come up with what does your building need for this next school year? And there are specific questions that are asked. They're around student achievement, they're around your facilities and your supports and your resources. But then I ask a last question this time of what are the top 5 things that if you had them, you'd be in amazing shape. And so everyone was really great about sharing those. So there are some common themes across the entire building needs assessments that probably echo a lot of the things that you guys have shared as well. So additional supports with our tier 2 and 3 students, the ones with learning loss and the ones with behaviors. Definitely hearing that loud and clear that we need help. So we're looking at, again, that'll be part of our conversation. Standards aligned curriculum and resources. Again, we are working on that progress this summer. Hopefully some of you are part of that, to write curriculum and get it back in the hands of our staff so that they can use those resources and have a coordinated effort. Being fully staffed in our classified, we get it. We know. I will tell you that we have allocated just over 200 paras, and we cannot seem to get above 175 at any point. We have tried and tried and tried. Just paid out 3 more bonuses today that Mark sent to me for people that were hired. And so we're doing, if you have ideas how we can keep that and move that forward. I know more money. I get that. I do get that. I will share with you a personal side note. My son took a position in another district. It did pay more, and he's doing well. He's a para. However, I also talked with their finance director, and he said, yes, we raised it, but we're not having significantly more success. That's not an answer to we won't do it. It's just not the only thing that's on the table. And they thought, oh, we solved it. Everybody makes $15.50 an hour. Everybody will apply. And they still are struggling. So we know it's an answer. It's not the only answer. So we're going to look at those types of things. Additional support with our growing SPED numbers. We get that too. As we have staffing meetings every Monday and on the administrative side, those are loud and clear as well of what can we add or what do we need for next year to make sure we give relief to our buildings. So we're going to talk about the money in a minute. But again, these are definitely priorities that have come loud and clear from our building needs assessments and from yours as well. Our technology classroom needs, this was mainly from our elementaries, talking about do we really have a plan? Is this really the best technology we can use in those instances? I know there are plans through Ed Services and through the technology department to address those and to come up with a re-looking at where are we, is this really the right thing for our staff and our teachers, and then also teacher devices as well. We know that is a need. So again, longer term plan, but again, these are things that are coming up from your buildings as well. And then always facilities needs, whether they're improvements or updates. And some of those things are deferred maintenance that we just haven't done over the past 5 to 10 years. And so some of those would be rolled into a bond process that we're beginning. Not all of them, but we do have deferred maintenance projects that would be part of that bond process to try to address some of these greater needs that we just can't meet with our current capital outlay. All right, so let's talk about funding. So projections for next year. It's a little bit tenuous at this point. We're still waiting on the legislature. As you know, they adjourned last week, but there were no decisions made. They won't be back until April 29th to start the next session. But this is what we know or can at least try to plan to. So the first piece of this is the enrollment that you can use for next year's funding. So there's currently, there are 2 proposals, one in the House, one in the Senate, and they are to address the needs of some of our fellow districts who are growing and need that money now to meet their needs. And so part of that is to address funding you on your previous year or your current year. Unfortunately for us, that would mean a $322,000 hit, because we would be funded on 2 years ago, which is the way it's been for a long time. It's the previous 2 years, no current year. There has been a lot of movement in this. A couple of the things that came out that haven't been approved. In one side, it was let's delay it a year. I'm not sure that our friends with the growing population would agree with that, and I understand that. The other was, okay, then let's give a little relief just next year and let you blend and average the previous 2 years, but then following year, you have to do the current or the previous year. So that's where this went from 1.7 into $2 million. So we're grateful for them listening and throwing those things out. But I will tell you as well, last year we were talking about almost $4 million. We didn't grow. And that's where the needs, that's where there's not as much money. We didn't grow, and we have this, we can't use the 2 years ago piece. So the funding difference, as I said, from using the current law the way we've always planned for it and what's proposed is $322,000 less that we would receive. There are some additional bright spots, things that we're hoping for, that we're advocating for, as I know you are as well. An increase in special education funding. I think I'm optimistic. I'm going to be Pollyanna that it's going to come. We have this range that's been pitched to us. It really is up to, according to the latest agreements in the House and Senate, would be up to the State Board of Education to decide how that's allocated amongst districts. The first one is just to flat out raise the categorical aid. There's $75 million across the state that is currently being talked about being allocated. The first one is just raise the categorical aid, which gives everyone the same amount. But we know districts like ours have greater needs than some of our peers with the amount of money that we're transferring from the general fund to special education. So the second proposal was to look at those excess costs and do it proportionally. Take that and give everyone a factor, and then take it times the $75 million, and where'd you end up? And our projected amount went up to $1.3 million. Not a guarantee. Things can change. There's still 3 weeks. There's still another session. We're hopeful that this is what will happen, and we'll get this additional money on top of there. Another thing we've talked to the board about is we've not utilized our full authority on our cost of living allocation. It changed this year, and we wanted to be respectful of our taxpayers and not raise our mill rate. We have some other things coming in play. Our extraordinary growth is cutting in half again next year. It'll be the final year, so there might be a little wiggle room to get us to the top, which we estimate to be about an additional $100,000 of local revenue that we could plug in. And then, again, the projected carryover. And the caveat to that is we don't want to spend all that because we'll have a cash flow problem. The other part of that is this also means we would put nothing in our contingency fund, which currently sits at $3 million. The standard is at least have your largest payroll in your contingency fund. I'll be honest, you guys, I don't see a way unless we get like crazy amounts of funding that we'll ever get to this $9 million. But we definitely want to have more than 3 because we never want to be like, sorry, the payment was late. We can't pay you. The payment from the state. And that's happened. Hopefully not anytime again, but it has happened. So those are all things that we're considering as we're going through this budgeting process. So we looked at the non-payroll changes, and we've made some assessments of that. And some of this is, like I talked about, the software going into capital outlay. We are expecting our capital outlay fund to raise next year based on assessed valuations. And so we're being conservative with that new amount, but also looking at how can I funnel some of the operating expenses into this fund to free up a little bit more money. So these are the changes or the expected increases. So transportation, we know it will go up. We're in the final year of our contract with First Student next year, and we will renegotiate, and we will go out for bid or whatever we need to do, and that will be next year, but during the year for the following year. But we do expect, based on their increases and increased routes and sped, that and fuel and activity routes and all of that, that it's going to go up about $265,000. Utilities, we're projecting a 5 to 8% increase. We currently spend $2 million on utilities, so I kind of took 7.5, kind of went right in the middle. I like to be a little I don't want to go over that, so I'm a little cautious. Operations, these are the reallocations we talked about. So some of the things that we were charging to the general fund for operations, upkeep, maintenance, those types of building repairs, we actually can put in capital outlay as well. So we're giving some relief to the general fund by doing that. Building budgets. So this year was the first year that we actually did this a little more mathematically. And so we talked with principals and we let them know that we're going to fund you at $70 per enrolled student. Now, that enrollment is either the last day of school this year or your enrollment on September 20th, whichever is higher. Unfortunately, nobody grew this year, so they got what we had promised them. But I am committed to, if we get additional kids, then you'll get additional building funds. So everybody seems to be meeting that. I haven't heard any principals come to me yet and like, oh my gosh, I'm out of money. So they are given this money and they're able to allocate it to all of the needs. I will say a majority of the needs do go back to the classrooms, and I've seen a whole bunch of people getting stuff for end of the year and to get started for next year. So I'm glad that they're doing that. Department budgets, this includes like SPED, technology, ed services, those human resources, community relations, whatever. We anticipate that our SPED will increase another $250,000 next year. It's already at $250,000 this year, and we're in the end. My numbers are through the end of March. So, and a lot of that is day treatment and transportation, and it's just where it is. And then moving software out of our operating funds to capital outlay. So, administrative and district budgets. So we've really taken a look at those the last several years. Contractors. So one of those that was in there was our mowing contract. Again, also capital outlay eligible. So we're moving it. So it's taking it out of the general fund. We feel like we have enough money in our legal fund, we hope, and that what we're levying next year that we can reduce that. We also are reducing the dues that we pay district-wide, mostly like the board and like administrators and that kind of stuff. We're reducing that a significant amount. But unfortunately, paper and postage, we're already over budget in paper this year. The cost has been crazy, and it has fluctuated greatly. We're going out for bid for it, but again, it's a small little bit, but still $10,000 is $10,000. So, but overall, we're expecting a $135,000 decrease in our administrative and district budgets. And then the last one, everyone's dealing with this property and casualty insurance that we will renew in July. We'll hear more about this next month from our broker. We're projecting a 15 to 18% increase. We hope it's not that much. We know other districts that have gotten even more than that, but we have a longstanding record of the only thing I think major we've had is the Madison flood. So I think we're in good shape, and our broker is very optimistic that it won't be that much. It'll still be an increase, but it may be not that much, but we need to hold that just in case. So overall, we're expecting to increase the non-operating or the non-payroll pieces by 3.2% next year. Okay. So other things that we have to consider, and we are considering as we look at this and we work with you guys, is obviously retention and recruitment. It's right here on our board goals. Retention and recruitment, retention of SPED staff so that we can reduce those contracted positions. And then comparison with other local districts, we want to factor that into our equation, not just for SPED, but for everyone, and retention and recruitment. And then the big one is the paid district health benefit. We know it hasn't been raised in 3 years. We are committed to putting money aside for that for 2025. We are anticipating an 8 to 10% increase in our premium. And we do have a meeting with our broker and with United Healthcare in late April, and then we will go to the benefits committee that afternoon as well. So we're going to talk about options. We're going to talk about what do you do? Do we go back out to market? I will tell you, I heard a lot of let's go back to Blue Cross. You guys, these costs would be even higher with Blue Cross. That's why we ended up with United Healthcare, unfortunately. I'd love to go back to, but we can't afford it. And it really has to do with our own claims. And we have some really large claimants, and I'm glad that those individuals have those specific coverages to protect their family, but it does end up in the wash with what we get charged as we move forward.
Maybe you might mention also what would happen with our prescription benefits.
Yeah, they would have been cut drastically. The formulary was they already did change. I know they changed. Amy Jackson got plenty of calls and questions about that. But our formulary with Blue Cross, there was no negotiating with them. It was going to be cut significantly. Like, this is it. This is the list you get. And it was a lot of items. So we know that's a big deal to our staff. So Again, I would love to go back to Blue Cross as well, but I think we have to do what's right for the district. We also don't want to strip benefits. We don't want to like water them down so that they're not even worth having. So that's kind of the delicate dance that we're doing as we approach this renewal. And we'll work through the benefits committee. And lastly, you all know this, but I'm going to say as Captain Obvious, enrollment growth is the key to our budget and financial stability. We know we need to grow. That will help us, won't solve every problem. It will create new ones, obviously, but we will receive additional funding. So with like the open enrollment, those funds, if a student transfers in, those funds come with that student. So we have a very small amount of students that would come in, but everyone, even people that move into our district, super helpful. Okay. Questions for me? Denise?
I'm just curious, enrollment changes since our enrollment day count. I mean, I know our building is like 25 more than we were on September 20th. So I just didn't know if that was a pattern that we're seeing throughout, because I know that wasn't predicted.
So if you watched my presentation last night about non-resident enrollment, the demographer has noted that we've had a greater out-migration over the course of a school year than kids coming in. And that was the case the first semester, but we are picking up kids since really about February, and we're up probably about 50 to 60 kids. Now that's district-wide, so you spread those out across 11 buildings. But we are seeing in-migration, and I did say this last night, I think we're ahead of the demographer's prediction. His prediction is really a year from now, not next year necessarily, but a year from now we'll start to see that growth. I'm more of the mind that that's going to start happening at the end of this year and into next year. So I think there's a lot of truth to what you're seeing, Denise. And again, I don't think it's necessarily district-wide. If you live in town, if you drive around town, you know the buildings that are probably going to start feeling the pressure just by where the developments are going in. So that's on our radar for sure.
So then, Amy, you had said that funding, base aid state per pupil was based upon either what we had current year. Is that what?
So that is the proposal that is currently in the legislature, is to make a change to that, and whether it goes into effect next year or it's the following year. But it would benefit us. Once we start to grow, we get that money the same year we get those kids.
Right.
And so in the past, it's been a delay of a year. Like you get the kids and you still have to educate them and add staff and all of those things, but you don't get the money till the following year.
So I thought I heard you say it could be either current year or year prior. Is that?
The current funding formula, as it's written into statute right now, is that you can use the larger of either the previous year or 2 previous years. So that's what we would be looking at if we were in that funding formula. If nothing happened in the Senate or the House before the end of the legislative session, we would be funded on 22-23. That was higher than this year,
Okay.
which would be a good thing. However, if we do grow and they do pass this, we could either use, if this is what they pass, the blended of those 2 years, which is lower than 22-23, but better than this year, or the higher of them. Or if they pass it, then we would use the higher of 920. Correct.
Which could be next year's actual.
It could
920.
absolutely be next year, yes.
Okay.
But we're waiting, again, the legislature has not made, I'm sorry, Lana, sorry. The legislature is still working through all of that, but I know they made some great progress on that toward the very end of the session. So we are basing a lot of our assumptions on, probably this is going to happen. So, but yes, you're right. If we do grow and we retain those students and we get even more before September 20th, then we would get the funding next year for those students, which would be great.
So in that scenario here, because you have to put a budget into place and send it off, so if the numbers grew, you would just have to do a republish like we've done in the past. So you would republish for the new students that you have to get that money.
Yes, and I will tell you that we do pad it a little bit in those budgets, just for that very purpose. So like SPED this year, I think I had it at $20 million just because we didn't know what to expect. And it's grown to, we think, almost 17, probably a little more than that this year. But that means that if we had to spend 18, then I don't have to republish the budget.
So is there a magic number where it says, I mean, granted, you're not going to republish the budget for one child,
No.
but is there a number where you would look at it and go, well, we've had an additional 100 kids or we've had an additional 50 kids, we need to republish the budget?
Yep. If
Okay.
it wouldn't be for the revenue, it would be for the spending.
Absolutely.
And so if we said, oh my gosh, we have to add 4 more teachers, and this through our projected whatever CTE, I don't know, throwing
Right.
that out there. If I didn't set that high enough and we had this growth, it sets our authority for spending. So if we wanted to be able to spend that much money because we got more money, then yes, we would republish so that we would let the public know, hey, we're not spending 500,000, we're spending 750,000, and republish that. They wouldn't necessarily have more taxes assessed for that.
Right.
It's just we have a legal authority of how much can you spend in that specific
Absolutely.
fund. So,
Okay.
yep,
Thank you.
great question. What else? I didn't do that great, you guys. Come on. All right. Seriously, if there are anything you want to dig into, I'm happy to share. Happy to share specific funds or different object codes, like what do we spend on XYZ. I have all that information, so I'm happy to share whatever you need.
So refresh our memories, the session reconvenes on the 29th of April,
That is correct.
and they have 3 weeks to wrap up the session.
I think they have till as long as it takes. I don't know. I could be wrong.
Okay,
I didn't. They try to get it done in 3 weeks,
okay.
but I think it's a go until you get it done, or until they are like, that's it.
Well, I think my point is that this is on pause until at least
Yeah.
April 29th.
Yeah.
I think they've got some interesting ideas and good ideas cooking, but we won't know more. We won't have a clearer picture until after at least April 29th.
Okay. Thank you. I don't know which one you want up next. Okay.
Yep, she's got one of these. You've got one. Well, thank you, Amy. That was a really good presentation of kind of the big ingredients that go into our budget casserole there. So that was, I think, very informative. So appreciate that. It was a yummy casserole. Okay, so getting back to the agenda. I'm not sure what we're talking about over there, but I feel like I'm missing out on something. Wow. Got the St. Patty's Day paper out. All right, let's go ahead and talk about some of these non-comp items. You had made the request for us to review the plan time subcommittee proposals. So it has been a while since I reviewed these, so I did go back through them. And I attached them here, and everybody has a handout. We can spend whatever time we need to on these, but there was a couple broad ideas. One was about specials, and again, this is the focus on elementary. And so one of the broad ideas was to hire art teachers and offer an additional special. That'd just be built into the schedule and add more flexibility for plan time. You can see the pros, adding that chunk of time. A shift to the specials teachers, that does take instructional time from classroom, so that could be a con maybe as well. Exposure to art, which I think everybody agrees is a really good thing. And I'm not sure I can speak to this SPED teachers plan time, but I'm guessing it would just free up more time for SPED teachers to have their students in specials. So the other one was, if it wasn't art, if it was an SEL instructor, and that idea, I'll be honest with you, didn't get off the ground too far. If these are certified staff, which they are in this suggestion or this proposal, that's a huge additional expense. And I think we just heard from the executive director of finance that we didn't set aside money for this. So that's obviously the major con. And then there's some other just facility and resource kind of questions, and maybe the lost instructional time, is that a trade-off that we want to make? So additional input, thoughts about that option? Or questions even?
So I'm the one that put this document together. So I just wanted to clarify that one of the things that we, and I think you have on your copy all the people who were part of this planning committee, so that are on the back of that. One of the things that we talked about a lot, and there were many elementary teachers who were a part of this, but one of the things that we talked about a lot with regards to that lack of or loss of instructional time was that, and it's in the pro column, that instructional time is shifted to special teachers. So right now, in elementary classrooms, elementary classroom teachers are teaching art.
Good point.
And so rather than the elementary classroom teacher teaching art, it would be the specials teacher who would be teaching art. So in terms of a lack of instructional time, no, because they're being shifted to an art teacher. And also, instructional time in art is instructional time. So
Good point. Other thoughts, questions, or corrections of the misinformation that I presented? Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, and I should have started with the group. I know that they put a lot of thought and time into this, and we're grateful for their input and effort. Okay. Anybody have strong feelings about that first option? I'll give you one last chance to try to promote it, or okay.
Yeah, and I understand the cost component of it, but I will just speak from the elementary component. Students that are coming in do not have, I've talked with our OT, they're coming in swiping things on their screens at home. And so their fine motor skills that they're coming into kindergarten with are not the same fine motor skills that were there 10, 15 years ago, because everything is swiping. So building those fine motor skills and even being able to cut properly, or being able to just cut around something quickly, those skills are very much needed for our students, and they're missing a lot of that when they come in. So we're spending a lot more time teaching some of those things that art would become very beneficial for those students.
Okay, thank you. And I guess just as a relates to the cost, again, you know, some of this process is sometimes things that we don't even necessarily agree with, or that we're obviously excited about, but cost is a factor in this, on this idea, guys. I just think we have to be candid about that. And it might be something that is just part of our longer term plan. Again, not saying that's not an option, but we'd have to figure out how to pay for it. Broad idea 2, alternate broad idea number 1, change the specials, PE, music, library, art, and having classified staff members enter the classroom for computer tech. I gotta be honest with you, I don't think I completely understand how this is gonna create additional plan time, but I think they're saying it's similar to broad idea number 1, and just alters the special schedule at most of our elementaries. And so
it was a while ago. So if I'm remembering correctly, when we were discussing this, and I think some of you were on that committee, so you can probably help me out on that. But I think the idea was that, and I think it's evident in the cons there, the teacher doesn't have access to the classroom. So that technology instructor would come into the classroom for that instruction, which would offer that classroom teacher. So instead of adding an additional special, that would be during classroom time,
yep.
Which would offer instruction in technology, which is important, but then the teacher would have that time for planning. But clearly, the con of that is that the teacher would not have would not have access to their room, or they would, but there'd also be things going on in their room. So it was an idea that seemed a little bit more feasible, but not necessarily, it wasn't necessarily a better idea. It was just another idea that had a lot of strong support for that. Well, it does, but not as much as adding art teachers. Yeah.
Okay. So that's alternative on the first proposal. And then we had, I think, a second broad idea, and it was about taking early release time. So converting one early release day per month for elementary plan time. I think that's pretty straightforward. Pros, no loss of instructional time, no staffing increase, provides a good chunk, allows for across grade level planning. Supervision really isn't an issue, because I would assume that would be the PLC where you're not doing supervision, and all staff in a building would be able to take advantage of it. So I assume that means like SPED and specials and everyone. Cons, one large chunk of time is not as useful as, getting into that rhythm and doing it on a weekly basis, lose a little momentum. Secondary teacher concerns, inequity, we probably have to crunch the numbers. I don't know that would be a huge issue, but yeah, definitely something we'd have to do the math on. And then there are certain months where, it doesn't work as cleanly. Reactions to that, pros, cons, commentary.
I think under that piece in the con that was talking about the discussion with that inequity with secondary teachers, basically elementary teachers would have less opportunity for professional
PO.
development points in that case than secondary teachers. So then there becomes that split
need.
right there.
Potential need, yeah. Yep. And I think that's something that, depending on what was decided, calendar committee could maybe take a look at. I know that there's some school of thought that we missed the mark by not having something here in April to maybe just, if nothing else, break up the schedule for staff and students to maybe drop a PD day in there. So my point being is I think that's something that if a decision is made, we could try to address that in calendar committee, maybe come up with some resolution. Okay. Well, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You guys put plan time on as one of your notice items. Are you prepared to maybe advance a proposal relative to these broad ideas, or would you like to put that off?
I think we need a discussion about
Okay.
these things. So I think that the way that we ended last negotiation session was the outcome of our discussions of planning time was that primarily we were going to create a subcommittee that was going to meet to discuss and come up with some suggestions. And these are the results of that subcommittee. So I don't know necessarily that we want to propose anything other than this is what that planning time subcommittee came up with. And we're all sitting here and we can all have a discussion about this. I mean, clearly we understand the idea about spending money and all of that, but these are the ideas. So let's have a conversation.
And I'm good with that. A thought though. What is it? Is this is for elementary, right? And I know you've articulated this several times, but can we refresh? What is it that you need? You need a certain number of minutes. You need a certain block of time every quarter. All of the above.
So when we get feedback from the bargaining unit, elementary teachers are saying over and over again, I do not have enough time to meet my professional demands. We are not getting that same kind of feedback from secondary folks. And part of that is because secondary folks have more minutes compared to instructional time compared to elementary. I don't know that we're looking for, I don't know that we're necessarily looking for a very specific number. We're not looking for an even match. We're looking for a way to find relief for the bargaining unit that is saying, I don't have enough time to do my professional job. I have to take stuff home. I have to stay late. Their work-life balance is not
Balanced.
balanced. And it's particularly evident from the feedback at the elementary level. That could mean looking at, I mean, we've got these plans that could mean looking at another way to balance that instructional time to plan time. Whether, I mean, we've put some Band-Aids on it over the last several years. You know, we added 5 minutes per day to allow some collected plan time that comes in half-day chunks. What are some of our other Band-Aids?
The quarter, the half days each quarter.
Yeah, I think that's part of that. Yeah, and then and looking at the early release as an opportunity to, oh, I know one of the Band-Aids was limiting how much time out of the 60 minutes per day is used for
Yeah.
other meetings. So that was another Band-Aid that helped a little bit. But we really haven't, I mean, obviously elementary is a difficult, it's a difficult problem, but I don't know that we can continue to do the same thing we've always done and meet the demands of what elementary teachers are being asked to do. So it may mean looking outside the box and looking at other ways to address this issue. Just as at one point, secondary looked outside the box and started doing block scheduling, or, you know, maybe there's a solution out there that isn't even one of these. But the problem is that elementary does not have the time to do what they're being asked to do.
And I'll even add, I don't know how it is in all of the elementary buildings, but a lot of times when we get this chunk of time, and we're thankful for the times we have in large chunks, we tend to go, oh, okay, I need to meet with groups and we need to plan. So we use that chunk instead of doing even our individual planning or our individual grading. We meet and go, okay, we've got to get students into groups. Let's meet with the reading specialist. And so then our reading specialist and our math specialist spend their entire time that they're given meeting with different groups. And so then it comes to, okay, the stuff that I still have to get done for grading and those things, again, goes home. So again, that work-life balance, because when you get those chunks, that's what at least at our building quite a few of the times end up being spent doing.
So again, we're talking about individual plan time. Again, want to be clear about that. Okay. Well, no disrespect to this group here, but I'm not sure some of the folks in the room are going to be able to maybe talk to elementary needs. And so in an effort to be productive and get the right people in the room, I don't want to revisit the subcommittee necessarily, but you know, getting some of those folks that are living it and some administrators that are living it, building principals, elementary principals in a room might be a better brainstorming session. You know, I was just thinking as you were talking, I'm not making any offers here, but like the special ed paperwork day, you know, that's been real invaluable to our special ed folks. That's one day a quarter. I'm not even saying that's a good idea, but would, you know, someone brainstorm? Yeah, and I know that they end up getting pulled into all kinds of things on those days, but again, that's another dedicated, or that's a dedicated time for those people to close it off if they can and need to. So anyway.
The only thing I was going to add is that I think it's totally worth noting that this topic has been on the table for years. And I know that money is a component of this piece, and I can respect that piece. But at the calendar committee, when we were talking about it, the committee's already done the work. So someone just needs to pick a plan. I mean, we had a committee and then it dissolved and nothing happened. And then we brought it up again, so then we formed another committee. Something just needs to happen. I mean, as in, they've given us this, and granted, we know what the Cadillac is. It's $400,000 and Heaven Art. That's what that is. But if that's not on the table, we've already had people do the work. So instead of having more people talk about it, we just need to implement something and do something with it.
Okay. Having said that, Angela, you guys noticed the item. So if you want us to make a call on this and counter based on what you're sharing, we can do that. Okay. So we'll get into this and we'll make a counter offer. Okay. So we'd also suggested a couple things that you said you wanted more time to consider. So maybe we could revisit those. And I guess I would add a footnote, Angela. I don't disagree with anything you said, other than over the last couple of years, we've made efforts to give you more plan time. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that albeit they were imperfect and they felt cobbled together, we did, I think, add some time for elementary folks. Okay, we had pitched kind of an unrefined idea about flex days. I don't know if you guys have a response to that, or if we would want to just hold that until we come back with a more fleshed out proposal.
If you could just, I think we'll hold off until you can give us a more black version than a gray version.
Fair enough. The other one was language related to school placement for students of professional employees. I don't know if you have a response to that.
We had some questions. I don't even think this on. We had some questions about children in the district. Mom has 2 kids already in the district. Third one's coming up. Would they be denied if there's not seats?
Yeah, if you're talking about non-resident. Yep. Nope. They get priority, and that was in one of my earlier presentations last night. I took it out, but employees, children, current employees, and ones we hire, those caps that we put out last night, they do not apply. And I don't know that I'd put that into the negotiated agreement, but that's actually in the statute and policy. Employees, kids will have priority. So I should have explained that better last night. Okay, agreement. Thank you. All right, we didn't come prepared with any of our other items because they're truly, I think, still comp items. So I didn't know if you guys had any non-comp items or even comp items you wanted to hit us with.
Okay, there's a little backstory to this. So about a week or 2 ago, I had a GENEA member send me an email and ask me about seminar at the high school. So this this teacher was saying that seminar is like a homeroom type class during the school day. It's about 30 minutes. And when a teacher is not there for that seminar, this particular teacher had been kind of absorbing students into their classroom. So either like just kind of dividing them up, she would take 10, the other person down the street would take 10, and they would, divide the class up. And I guess prior to this date, they had been putting in for compensation, like along, just the 0 to 60 minute time period for compensation. And I guess that recent request had been denied. And so they were trying to get they wanted me to just kind of address the situation. And anyway, so we got a clarifying email from our principal that basically said, when you are covering students from another teacher during seminar, that is not considered class coverage, that seminar time is considered supervision time. And I think we were like, in the email we had the negotiated agreement section kind of mentioned about short absences, and that yes, maybe that had been happening and that had been made as a mistake, but that going forward, that compensation would not be, so that isn't something that can be compensated for anymore. So you were gonna address all of and compensate for everybody up until maybe March 31st, and then after March 31st, those dates would not be, or that seminar coverage would not be covered anymore. So I guess before that email clarification came out, and I don't know if it came from Mark or I don't know who it came from, but before that came out, I had multiple questions about this. Number one, the idea that seminar time is considered supervision. My question was, does that then mean that we are not meeting the hours of like student contact time during the day? If that's not really considered class instructional time, then is there a half an hour chunk in the day that doesn't count toward our being in contact with students? Maybe I don't know if that's the right question. Minutes. And then the second question was, in the negotiated agreement, it doesn't actually specify what that coverage is, which I think is the ambiguity of is that a compensated item or is that not? But if it is not meant to be a compensated item, shouldn't that be something that we discuss at the negotiations table? And shouldn't that then mean that change in paying for that compensation should not happen in April, it should happen at the conclusion of the current negotiation time?
I'll clarify that the reason it was flagged is it was actually turned in as a half-day fold-in. And that's why the question was asked, and then we went to Human Resources and said, is this covered, is this not? And then I believe that came from you guys. So that's
came from me.
what it was originally turned in as a half-day fold-in for a 30-minute seminar. So I think that's where it flagged in payroll, like, whoa, wait. for
It's not a
seminar?
payroll
So-
thing, guys, so.
Yeah, so that's where the discussion began.
I crafted the email and Frank sent it out, so it could come from building administration. And, when this came back up, I sat down and talked to everybody that's involved that's been involved in the negotiations back to when we changed the class coverage rates, because that's what this is. And we asked many of the same questions you're asking, Leslie, and the consensus was seminar was never part of this. And I got to be honest with you, I don't remember, to your point, I don't remember us talking about that and designating that. But we also didn't put it in there. We also didn't put it in seminar. So your question about does it count as minutes? Absolutely, it counts as minutes. And I can pull up maybe the language. I think it says instruction in there. So again, the folks that I talked to in this district felt like it was not instructional time. That was never the intent. And that's why we chose to turn it off. And I own that I had told a handful of teachers. I went back through all my emails from whenever it was started in 2022 to find out who I said it was okay. I couldn't find anybody where I said it was okay, but I know in my memory I told somebody to put it through. But I also told people no. So I own the inconsistency. And so after we sent that email, I've told a few people, I would expect you guys are going to bring this up. And if you guys want to propose a seminar rate, I think we'd understand that. And if the staff at the high school feel very strongly, we turn this off mid-year and we should turn it back on, and some people missed out on money. I mean, the point is we told people, so they now know not to accept it if they don't want to do it for free.
Well, have you seen what's happening at the high school lately since this has happened? So
Well, we anticipated,
yeah.
but go ahead, sorry.
Well, since this has happened, I mean, we've had several days with the eclipse. I mean, that was a big day yesterday. There were a lot of people who were not here. And I think the 3 seminars that were needing coverage, I think they were just put in the MAC. So I think like they were covered, but they were just kind of moved to a large location. So no one is taking these seminars anymore. No one's folding kids in. No one's taking them. And that's if that's what we
That's a
need to
choice.
do, that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
At least there is someone there watching them, and they can move around and do the thing that they need to do during seminar.
I think for me, I don't remember thinking about this a great deal. Again, I'm being honest with you guys. But in talking to others, the notion that seminar is like, AP, folding in AP, physics kids is not the same. So again, I'm not trying to coach you up on what you might want to do, but I don't think any of us felt like seminar was the equivalent to having kids folded into your third grade class and you're instructing them on reading, writing, and math, or AP Physics, or Algebra 1 or English 9. Taking all those kids and being responsible to instruct them is different than seminar, getting kids in seminar. The other thing is, there's probably some devil in the details here. How many kids did I get? If you get a whole class of, Algebra, English 9, we can kind of ballpark that. We know it's going to be consistent. If you get another special ed teacher's kids, again, those are different students for sure. So there's probably some refinement that would have to go into above and beyond just saying this is seminar and this is a different rate. So all that to say, we're probably open to listening to a solution to this, but that's the background and how we arrived at sending that email out.
I'll just add to, I would just say, if this is something that we want to discuss, I think that's fine. I think the law of unintended consequences, though, too, because of the nature of seminar, especially on days students can travel, we would definitely need to put some parameters around that of, okay, so if I was prepping for an AP Chem test and I was going to bring in 15 kids to my classroom to work with them, does that count? I mean, I think there are some things that we need to think about. I won't get paid, but the person who takes 3 kids from another class will. So I think, again, those are just questions that have come up from my payroll team of what ifs. And
That's
so
not
I
just
think,
payroll, guys. Again,
yeah, I mean, I think those are just,
there is an assumption that
again,
the
just
high school
thinking about
teachers.
all the details. And as you craft the language, think about those. What's the intent?
If you're a high school science teacher and you have seminar, I assume you're comfortable with a student coming down from another class and asking you questions. And I know that's not what we're talking about, but Amy's right. We're talking about over 100 teachers at the high school, and people have a different interpretation. So we'd have to spell this out.
So I'll comment about the seminar piece because I can wear that hat for a little bit. I would agree that the whole intent, because I was here when block scheduling was put into place. So yes, during seminar, if I'm a math teacher at the high school and I've got 3 kids that need help, seminar is the time that they would come down and travel. I don't think there's a high school teacher that thinks I need to get paid for those 3 kids. I don't. But I do think it's when you add the additional kids to your room, I think is the factor. And I think part of it that we need to talk about too is that our substitute situation, though it's immensely better, it's not perfect yet. So on the day that you have a person that calls in at 7 o'clock and you don't have a teacher for them at 7 o'clock and you're pulling people over here, I think we need to be a little more flexible in the fact of what's going to be working best for that building. And if I'm willing to have a teacher, because I mean, we've already talked about it. In the middle school situation, I know what we tend to do because our PE teachers will take those kids, no questions asked. And I'm not talking 5 kids, I'm talking a whole set of kids, like 25 kids to their additional kids that they already have. And so in that scenario, I think we have to look at that and say to yourself, I know in the elementary sometimes, like if I have a 3rd grade class, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but if I have a 3rd grade class and Mrs. Hanson's not there today and we don't have a sub, well, one teacher might take 5, the next one take 5, and they absorb those kids, and I understand that. But those are extra kids that they're teaching. In the scenario that I just talked about, it's not 5 kids that you're taking. We're not distributing 5 kids. Or at the high school, they're not going to distribute 5 kids. They're going to give you a whole class because that's what they have. And so, I just think that we need to be more flexible, because if it's working for our buildings, then
Here's what I'd say. We've had these conversations and said exactly what Angela said. The distinction for me is Walt Cochran walks across the hall and says, hey, Ryan Plankenhorn, take my 20 kids. During seminar, Ryan's not instructing them, he's supervising them, and that's additional responsibility. So I've already said, should we consider that? I've already said that, guys. So I'm probably halfway to where you want to be. The distinction I would make is folding in was intended for elementary. And they're taking them, all of those kids, and they're instructing them, and they're typically taking them for a longer chunk of time. I don't think that's the same as seminar. Okay.
Agreed. And I think that's where it came up, honestly, you guys, is at the same time that we received this request, we also received the PE teacher who was taking 50
Yep,
kids.
at
And
the
I'm
middle
like,
school.
wait a second, how is this equitable? And so that's why we ask the question. So I think there just need to be clear expectations. And I think maybe we need to look at, what does that really mean? Is it really folding in? Is it something else? And so I think that's where we struggle from a payroll perspective as things are turned in. And principals are super busy and they approve a lot of things. But Janet's been here a long time. I'll just call her out. And she has brought a lot of things to me, not that they're wrong, just like this isn't equitable. How is this fair to your PE teacher who's doing this for 4 hours, getting the exact same amount as someone who took 10 kids for 30 minutes? So again, I think that's definitely something we need to talk about, and we need to make sure that we're addressing all of the needs, but doing it in a fair way. And I think that was the whole reason that it got brought up, is because they both were turned in as folding in, and they were two completely separate things.
So you guys noticed extra duty. This is folding in. So, I need to talk to our team. I don't know that we'd preclude you guys from advancing an idea on this, especially considering when it came to your attention. So I don't want to discourage you guys from advancing a request. We'll consider it. Does that seem fair? Okay. All right, these are good, juicy items here. What else do you got? Actually, I'm not sure I want to ask. What else you got tonight, guys? Was that for the microphone or just your team over there? Okay. Yeah. Green light will come on.
Okay. All right, I think
Yeah. Why didn't you yell at her?
it was peripheral.
That's true.
I think we're going to just start where we ended last year, because I don't know that it was really addressed, but just the language for adding EC plan time into
Okay.
the negotiated agreement. Yeah. I don't, we're just passing out the same, we're just starting where we ended.
So if I understand, you're providing the same proposal for our consideration. Okay.
If, just a quick summary.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
All right, it doesn't, this just adds to the negotiated agreement
Yep.
current practices. It doesn't add anything. It did make room for early release, so that we weren't asking for more time than what was available on early release days. Yes, it is. Thank you. Yes. So it really is just a documentation of what is going on, and it's to ensure, as changes move forward, that EC teachers have a space in the negotiated agreement that speaks to what they need and what they are currently doing.
So you've got a rationale here. Obviously, that's the same stuff we considered last year. And then under F, planning time, the language, this whole entire thing is the language you're proposing that we insert.
Yeah, so the bottom.
Bottom.
You know what? This is not printed in color,
Yeah.
but the bottom part would, the last paragraph would be the
addition.
additional language.
Okay.
So the first part's already in print in the negotiated agreement. The bottom paragraph would be
The
the new
addition.
language.
Thank you. Hey, the green button's on, Jody. Are you proud?
Okay, yes.
So I think it would be worth noting here on this particular part, this costs the district nothing, and it promotes that little thing that's on your thing there about staff retention and keeping people here. I think it's just, I don't want to call it a security blanket. It's just, once again, showing people here's what we value you, we appreciate you, and here's how we're going to support you in that particular piece. It's not adding anything, it's already what they're doing. It's just what they're doing. We just want to put it in there so that that part, because let's be honest, we've had some little revolving door issues going on here, and people come in and say something and then it changes over here. And so if that's there, there's some security that sets in there that goes, okay, we know that that's not going to be touched and that we're going to value those people. I think that's all we're trying to look for here. That's it.
I do think one of the questions that, I don't know that we really addressed this last year, but I do think that one of the questions that came up was, why are the minutes more than the other roles? And the role is a dual role. It does have everything that's gen ed plus everything that's sped. It's a big role, and it takes a lot of planning for it. You're planning for all the gen ed kids in there, and then you're planning for all the IEPs with the level of needs that students are in. You could be planning 3, 4 structured teaching experiences throughout the sessions. So that the additional minutes that are already provided right now, but this is just putting them in the negotiated agreement as a documentation of what we're doing. The reason they're more is because the role has 2 parts to it.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to talk that through. Yeah, the additional minutes made me a little queasy, just because when teachers across the district get in and see the difference in minutes, their gears start turning. I think you're reassuring us that your 3rd grade colleague isn't going to get in here and go, oh my gosh, Bev's getting, okay. Well, that's helpful for us to reconsider. I don't think we're going to have a response here tonight, guys, but, and I know you said that last year, but just as, you know, the kind of the administrator of the negotiated agreement, my gears are always turning, how someone might get in there and get stuck on something or misinterpret, but it's spelled out here. It's what you're doing, right? I'm not saying we're in total agreement, but let us reconsider.
I would also say from the elementary perspective, the preschool teachers, if their children get specials based on what's available,
Right.
those teachers are going to specials with their kids. So every day they are in those specials classes. When I can have that moment for my plan time, they don't get that opportunity. So for the elementary perspective, we do not have any concerns with what they're getting because we understand and look and see what they're doing throughout every day.
It's in the record, right, Deb? Thank you, Robbie. All right, any other things that you would like to present this evening? Work on that, please. Okay, let me go back over the agenda here. So I think that next time we can respond to a couple things that you presented today, or at least one. We'll flesh out flex days probably. I am starting to doubt that we have enough items for another meeting before we get a clearer idea of funding. So I'd rather not drag you guys in here and spend 15 or 20 minutes, even if we could get through a couple of these items. So I don't know what that first full week in May looks like, but maybe we could pull our calendars out and, you know, assuming that the legislature gets back and they crank through in a week, put something on the calendar, and then we'll just wait and see. Obviously, Amy would need a couple days of lead time even once decisions are made. So, you know, if they make a decision on Monday and our meeting's on a Tuesday, we may have to push it back even due to that.
Well, I will, yeah, I am definitely running every single scenario, so, I mean, I don't need a ton of time, but I will need to just make sure it's accurate, and meets whatever does finally pass, but every time there's an iteration, I have another little tab in my spreadsheet, so I promise that I'm I'm trying to get as much as we can in there.
Maybe the sweet spot is mid-May before we get into the end of the year stuff. And okay, so I don't know what that week is. Yeah, Carla would move for me. I'll make it worth her while. That's what we just said. So you can help me. Bring some of those cinnamon rolls, okay?
Okay, gotcha.
Let me check my calendar. Lana? Principals? As far as you know, you're okay? Okay. Is that, what did we say again? Works for me. It's soccer. How many times do I have to tell you it's soccer? I'll be there. All right, let's go ahead and lock it in. We'll drag Tom there if we have to. We'll go kidnap him or something. We'll get him here. Okay, good stuff, guys. Thanks for your time. Have a good night.